Hello, Tim from Fair Play Now on Friday the 16th of April 2021. This week has been a week, I think, of kind of more establishment type figures coming out of the woodwork to call out the whole government stance and the actions they're taking regarding the current situation. And the video I put out this morning was all about the nurse on UK column news who, despite being a very senior person involved with the rollout of the Big V, is actually saying how bad it is. And yeah, I can't believe some of the language she was using in that clip. I don't know if you've seen it already, but yeah, genocide. She wasn't sort of shying away from using big words like that, was she? If you haven't seen that, check out my other video, probably just below this one, and the UK column news article I linked to on that. But this video, I'm going to talk about a guy called General Jonathan Riley. He's a retired general, very senior person in the British Army. I'll be going over onto the computer screen in a minute to show you his article, but again, you don't really get much more establishment than a general from the British Army, and some of the, again, very hard-hitting stuff he was coming out with, heavily criticising the government, is quite remarkable. So I'm going to hop over onto the computer in a second, but I just thought I'd show you this because the propaganda is getting ridiculous. It's getting everywhere. As you may know, if you've been subscribing to this channel quite a long time, I'm actually an electrician. I just do these videos in my spare time in the evenings and stuff. But as an electrician, I get this catalogue through from one of my suppliers, and there's all full of electrical bits that we electricians love to buy, and they come out with these catalogues. This company does every couple of months, normally with sort of nice sort of drawings on the front of, I don't know, yachts and Spitfires and Concords and all sorts. But take a look at what they've chosen to use on the latest episode or issue of this. Is that propaganda or what? You've got the, obviously, the NHS rainbow in the back. You've got the NHS doctors struggling, masked up of course, struggling to fight the lurgy with a syringe, no doubt full of the Big V. So, and I'm sure that it's just this company doing their bit of virtue signalling or whatever it's called. But yeah, if that's sort of not propaganda, I don't know what is. But anyway, that's just a little aside I thought you might be interested in. So we'll jump over onto the computer screen and go through this General Jonathan Riley's article. Okay, so this is the publication that we're talking about, The Conservative Woman. I don't really know much about this publication, but just scrolling down some of the articles here, it looks like they are writing some pretty gritty articles calling out everything to do with the lurgy. And this one here, why is the Big V being relegated from the best hope to it helps? Yeah, quite. And there's this one here, lockdowns do not suppress the virus, studies show. Yeah, it looks like, yeah, here's one. Wife tells of man's paralysis after the Big V. Here's another hard-hitting article here, the tainted morality of using aborted fetuses to make the Big V. Yeah, that really is a thing. Check it out. So yet another reason not to be having the blimmin' thing, to be honest with you. But this is the article here I want to look into by Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley, just published a couple of days ago. It's the 16th today. So if we go in here, I'll scroll right way down to the bottom first of all. And there's a bit of blurb here about this general. He's a retired general. I think he retired about 10, 12 years ago. But he was former commander of British forces in Sierra Leone and Iraq, and deputy commander of all NATO forces in Afghanistan. He's now UKIP's national spokesman on defence and veterans matters, and will be standing in the Welsh Assembly elections in May for Mid and West Wales. So it doesn't really matter if you kind of like or agree with UKIP or not. The takeaway here is that this guy, Jonathan Riley, is an establishment figure, which makes, he's standing in elections. He was very senior commander in these various campaigns. So it really does make what he's saying in this article all the more kind of startling. Yeah, there really are what you'd call establishment figures calling the whole thing out. So let's just go through it. I won't read the whole article, and it's not too long. It sort of just goes down to here. But we'll just pick out the juiciest bits. So he starts off by saying, in all nations that make up the United Kingdom, we are governed by people who may differ on some aspects of politics, but who now share disreputable anti-democratic beliefs and whose goal appears to be the end of liberty. So that very first paragraph is very hard hitting, very much calling out the government and the other parties as well, who are pretty much supporting the government, and what on earth they're up to. Doesn't look like anything good. So lies and lockdown are their methods, loss of liberty their aim. Implicit in these three ideas is an ever-increasing state power grab, the smashing of small, medium and large businesses, and the denial of family life. So yeah, that's what people like me and a lot of other people have been saying for months, but it's nice to see that at least some of the establishment figures are seeing this as well and starting to speak out about it as well. Their physical expression can be seen in the destruction of hard-won civil liberties, the end of travel, control of basic social interaction, and the creation of a nation of scared, illness-obsessed people confined to their houses, vaccine-compliant and state-dependent. The real roadmap is not, as Boris Johnson asserts, out of lockdown, but one to keep us in it. And wow, for a guy like this to be saying that kind of thing, and up to now it was only the likes of David Icke who was kind of saying this, but not establishment figures. So as we all know, the first lockdown was all about protecting the NHS, but it was apparent by summer here, he's saying, that the NHS was no longer in any real danger of not being able to cope, having discharged patients en masse from hospital beds in March, leading to an increase in deaths at home and in care homes. But why the government chose to double down and has maintained the restriction momentum since, in the face of all the evidence that shows this is unnecessary and deeply damaging to the health of the nation as well as the economy, is yet to be revealed, perhaps at the G7 meeting in June. And then he goes on all the way down here about all the inconsistencies that we've been suffering from over these many months. And yeah, do you remember this, the whole R number or R rate thing? Do you remember the time when we were told that restrictions would end when the R number dropped below 1? When the R number was the key measure? Keeping the R down will be vital to our recovery, and we can only do it by discipline and working together, Johnson blustered as quoted in the Financial Times. Oh, but of course, when the R number did fall below 1, new criteria came along. It all became about cases, with a case defined as anyone testing positive from a PCR test, regardless of whether the person was actually ill. And then he talks about the high cycle PCR testing and its inaccuracies, which led to all these supposed cases. So he talks about that there. It was also then that government mandated face masks. People were told to mask up when they went to shops in high summer in response to a winter upper respiratory tract virus. Most complied to the extent of wearing masks outside in the fresh air. Yeah, exactly. That sort of puts it into perspective there, doesn't it? People having to wear masks in high summer for a winter disease, basically. I mean, how ridiculous. Then in November came the great vaccine breakthrough when the UK was the first country to grant emergency approval to the novel Pfizer one that would protect the vulnerable and buy the rest of us our liberty. Ministers have vowed there would be no shortcut on safety or effectiveness. The great and good fell for it. If the V delivered freedom, they would have it. What became apparent was a coercion strategy, and that all the population would have to have the big V, whether they needed it or not. All of a sudden, once the rollout was well underway, it became conveniently unclear how protective the big V actually was. The ugly head of spurious variants was promulgated by the government, Health Secretary Matt Hancock, making the first of his variant warnings before Christmas. Soon the prospect of necessity of annual boosters was mooted, and all the while the population was being softened up for the big V passports or COVID cert certificates by Weasel word ministers. It's all sort of true stuff, isn't it, that he's coming out here with and writing about. And then this lady here, Dr. Mary Ramsey of Public Health England, told Andrew Marr on March 21st that the planned end of restrictions on June the 21st would not bring normality. And she went unchallenged by him. Yeah, typical of a BBC reporter or sort of journalist, isn't it? Sort of not challenging anything the government actually says. Then he talks about the rollout of the big V here, and Transport Secretary Grant Shapps interviewed with Julia Hartley-Brewer in Talk Radio. He failed to worm his way out of an earlier undertaking that if the government did not fully unlock the country by early March, after the most vulnerable groups were vaccinated, he would stand on the barricades to get our freedoms back. Yeah, I remember him coming out with this kind of thing, and how the main criteria was just to get the vulnerable sort of hit up with the big V. Of course, the goalposts moved. Can we believe him? No, don't think so. What happened to Matt Hancock's promise in an interview with The Spectator on January the 9th, that when COVID hospital cases fall and pressure on the NHS is lifted, that is the point at which we can look to lift the restrictions. The goal is not to ensure that we give the big V the whole population before that point. It's to give the big V to those who are most vulnerable. And at that point that he asserted we are going to have a great summer, and he would still cry freedom. To date, there has been no such cry from him. In fact, the reverse. Just 1 month after Hancock's brash words, we were already being told that the restrictions would need to remain until the whole population, not just the vulnerable, gets the big V. In fact, as MP Steve Baker said on March 20th in The Sun, restrictions are now tougher than they were last summer before the big V rollout even began. Then Jonathan Riley goes on to write here, as for having a great summer, Shapps says, I can't give you a definitive will there or will there not be the opportunity to take holidays this year, either at home
or abroad. This is now confirmed with foreign travel for any leisure purpose banned until July at the earliest. The date creeps ever backwards. Yeah, of course it blimmin' well does. Then he talks about the Big V passports. You remember sort of 11 times last year the government insisted there was absolutely no plans for them. And then he says in December the Daily Mail revealed 2 companies had started work on developing them. And then March 25th, Johnson announced that he will, as he was always going to do, of course, attempt to roll these out, creating a new apartheid on the basis of discrimination on health grounds rather than skin colour. Good luck with the legal minefield that this will sow. So yeah, this is really hard-hitting stuff, isn't it? He's basically calling Johnson a liar here. Yeah, it's all good stuff and all very true stuff. Then he's sort of talking about here how it sort of reminds him of Eastern Europe before 1989 under communism. Then he goes on to say here, Public Health England seems to confirm this. March the 18th, Von Doyle, its medical director, said that the Big V does not give you a pass. Even if you have had it, you must continue to follow all the guidelines. So what's the point of it then? On the one hand, the government is taking steps to force everyone to have the thing. On the other, the NHS, the manufacturers, and even Ferguson admit that the Big V is unreliable, will not prevent anyone from catching or passing on COVID, and is likely to have unpredictable long-term side effects because of the type of technology used. And that is the end of the article. So, yeah, very, very hard-hitting stuff there. So if you want to read that yourself, it's, as I say, on this publication here, on their website, Weasel Words, Broken Promises, Roadmap to Endless Lockdown by Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley, April the 14th, 2021, that was published. And yeah, I think he really does nail the situation that has been going on ever since last year and that will be going on into the future really, really well. And the fact that it's someone like him saying this stuff is particularly enlightening, I think.
So there you have it. That was Jonathan Riley's article, and pretty hard hitting, but it's not really the content I want you to take notice of. It's the type of person writing material like that now. And you know, these establishment figures are coming out more and more and more, I think. And I think as the weeks go by, especially if people like you and me can sort of push the issue as well with little videos like this, or however else you want to do it. You know, we all have our own little ways and means, but yeah, I think the more we do this, the more these sort of bigger figures are going to come out and start calling out the government. And once we kind of get enough of them coming out, hopefully some kind of tipping point will arise before too long. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting, but I'll leave it there for today. Tim from Fair Play Now, thanks for watching.